Please welcome to the stage Oliver Stone. This must have been a film the studios were jumping up and down, getting excited to make, yeah? The studios?
The studio?
Yeah.
No.
How did this film get made?
Well, I mean, can you hear me?
Take this.
Can you hear me?
Hello?
No, I'm just, I mean, I hello, yes, I know the answer to the question, but this was a film that took years to get made. And there was a period where you hoped and thought the studios might get involved.
Yeah, this was who wanted to make this movie? Frankly, it was considered too depressing, and I agree, it's depressing. But I guess it took 10 years. It was made, I wrote it in '76, and it came out in '86. And it finally got made. But it was rejected a few times, and it went through a process and almost made, and then I cast it once. I went out to the Philippines, did all the scouts, came back, and it was canceled. And then eventually it got made by a British company, and frankly, very little money, very, very little, and we really learned a lot of lessons out there. We had made an earlier film with the same company who trusted us. It was called Salvador, and we did it for even less money. So we learned a lot on that, and we graduated right into this. But this was a challenge for the money and the time that we had.
Yeah.
We did it as quickly as possible. It was the opposite of the Apocalypse Now story, which was done over a year or something like that. And of course, with all the resources of Hollywood. It was a surprise. The whole thing was a surprise. Did very well. Came out right away. It hit a note with the veterans.
Right. Yeah, a lot of Vietnam veterans.
From day one, and gradually it just spread and spread and spread, and it became, and everyone, all types of people started to come to see it. And one thing led to another. It was just it's a dream story. You know, you don't want to. It's what happens once in a lifetime. And I realized that shortly thereafter, and you adjust. But it's really, I'm glad we got it made, and it was a Cinderella story.
In terms of it getting made for you.
Yeah. He's a filmmaker, so he knows as well as I do all the traps, the ferrules, and the failures. For every one you get made, you get 3 or 4 not made.
Yeah. There was a period that you thought you would, in order to get it made, you would not direct. Isn't that true? There was some time spent looking for the possibility of another director that the studios might
No,
back.
that was Born on the 4th of July.
Born on the 4th.
Which was the next, I did Born on the 4th of July 3 years later, which also got a lot of attention. But that was another story that was written in 1979. The problem was that he was even more depressing than this. Except it's a very uplifting story because Ron Kovic survived, and he survived he's still alive and doing very well on the wheelchair. But the thing is that you have to understand the Vietnam phenomenon in America, the way it was treated. It was completely misunderstood at first, and then all these incredible films were starting to come out with operatic films with big money. Apocalypse Now was one of them. Certainly, Deer Hunter was another one, and then
Rambo.
What?
Rambo.
Which one?
Rambo.
Yeah. Rambo made the most amount of money, and Rambo 1, and then 2, and then Chuck Norris got in on the action, but that was after us. No, Chuck Norris was before us. I'm sorry. Chuck did Missing in Action, 2 of them, I believe. So it was completely misrepresented and exaggerated to a degree that was perilous to the nation's psyche. It didn't really deal with any kind of reality, At least this was an attempt to right the boat, to right the ship. And I think it came more from that, like this, thank God this is not Rambo. And I think people, because I think people really wanted to know more about it, because they had made movies that were successful, but they still wanted to know more. What was it really like? Coming Home was also a movie, well, more
Right.
on the home front. But
Right.
it had failed at the box office, although it was very successful in I'm sorry, I got that. It was 78, that's later, yeah.
Yeah. So almost ironically, this film that has this brutal realism about the war was something that the American audience needed to see, I guess partly as a catharsis to process and not turn away from the reality
Yeah,
of
I
the
think
war.
there was a lot of that. Of course, families, veterans. There was a tremendous upsurge of empathy.
For veterans.
And you know, we hope, I went to the VDAW, as you did. I went to the convention and I spoke very strongly about not getting involved in another war, and that didn't do much good. But we really believed for a while there, I'd say through the 70s and into the 80s, that we could lick this thing, that America would give up this addiction to war. But, I mean, we had the Grenada thing, but that was minor, but still, it was a joke.
Sure.
It was a joke in terms of real war, and then, but by 89, when Hussein invaded Kuwait, it was rendered into, it was misunderstood by the public into it became a whole reason to send, how many, 300,000 troops to the Gulf? So that was the beginning of a new era in American foreign policy. When you send 300,000 troops to the Holy Land, you're starting something big.
Yeah, it didn't take long, however. I mean, it was not a protracted nightmare like this. That war took.
Well, it still is. We're still in the Middle East. We never
Yeah.
got out, and this is, I'm sorry to say, but this is directly responsible for so much shit. It's worse than Vietnam because it's just spread and killed millions of people, as in Vietnam, but killed a lot of the Middle Eastern people, and it doesn't stop. We're stuck. And that's what George Bush Sr. wanted. He wanted our troops in the Holy Land. He wanted them there. He wanted them there because it was crucial to our new policy, which was more aggressive, and a decision really to go back into this geopolitics.
So, was the intensity that was shown in the film what you experienced? How many firefights do you think you experienced while you were in Vietnam?
Well, thank God I would say this is 50% of what I experienced, because this is a movie, and you have to understand it's a movie. And you see, in a movie, you rarely see the enemy, because your visual perception is far better than the camera's. The camera sees close, so you have to bring everything closer to the camera in order to see it, and that doesn't match the geography of war. So that's going on all the time. Very rarely do you see what you kill or not kill, or what happens. And it was a lot of jungle fighting, and also beach fighting, which I tried to show in Born on the 4th of July. Beach fighting I was in 3 different combat units, so that changes. I went from the south to the north. And yeah, there's a whole other story. After I got wounded a second time, I went back and I was on in another kind of I was doing MP, auxiliary duty. And that's very interesting work in Saigon with the criminal elements. There was a whole concept of so many deserters at that point. This was 68. So many deserters in Saigon, and living like kings, some of them. Living some of them really well in the drug underground. And then I went back to the field because I got disciplinary issues, and I decided to go back to the field because I'd rather be in the field than having to serve in Long Bin jail. I hated the yet they hated us too, you know. They were ripping us off too. So there was all kinds of, that's the problem. When you occupy a country, like when you send money into a country, whether it's soldiers and PXs, and the PXs represent so much corruption, when you start to do that, it drove the economy into into the stratosphere. Those people got rich, but at the same time, many of them corrupted, and at the same time, many of them hated us for it and fought us from inside. They had so much insight. They had so much information from the inside. It's, you know, when my base camp, they had tunnels underneath in Kuchi. Kuchi was outside Saigon. It's a gigantic complex. They had a gigantic amount of tunnels underneath. We didn't figure it out until after the war, basically.
Yeah.
We found little pieces here and there, but they didn't understand the whole concept. It got written about. That's amazing. I mean, they would send, they had inside information on all our movements. Whenever we would send out helicopters in troop size, battalion size, even company size, I think they knew we were coming.
How much training did the actors go through before they started shooting?
I went through 16 weeks. 16 weks at North Carolina.
For your own experience, for your own training.
Basic for everybody, and advanced infantry.
Uh-huh. So you went through 16 weeks of training before you went to Vietnam. How much training did you put your actors through who came to be in the film?
Hey, come on, that was easy. But 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah, but they were really, that was tough. We put them through 24/7. You know, by SAC rules, you're not supposed to work more than 12 hours, so we screw that. You know, they needed to get the impression, first of all, that camaraderie that happens when you're camping out with someone next to you, and you're all night, and you're on duty with them, and you have a guard duty, and you have to stay up, and you get dirty together, and you get into that whole mentality. You have to really be in the dirt to understand how you can get to be like an earthworm. And we said, and then we had the cooperation of the Philippine military, and we'd launch attacks, fake attacks at night and stuff, just to teach them a little bit about what was going on and how to react. And they reacted very well indeed. It was very happy. In fact, most of them would probably tell you to this day that it was a wonderful experience and they loved it.
Sure. So, what was your response to Apocalypse Now, which is quite a different film? But
I admire it as a film, and I think it's a cinematic achievement. It's just not the reality. It's it's John Milius' time. You know what John?
Right.
John Milius' hero is Curtis LeMay. You got to realize that. So Curtis LeMay, I don't know if you know who he was, but John is very right wing to the right of Attila Hun. So he celebrates the military. That's what Apocalypse is about, basically. And he also Deer Hunter's Another World. I mean, it's an fascinating movie, very well done by Michael Cimino, but still nothing to do with the reality of what we saw.
yeah. People have a couple questions. I mean, I can keep certainly talking with Oliver here, but I'm wondering if people have some questions. Yes. Does somebody have a microphone? Yes.
Any more than Rambo, of course.
Rambo is the ultimate realism, yes. We won. We won with Rambo.
But Rambo was so successful. It was a Tarzan movie come back to life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, basically, Stallone is a great, unique actor, very unique, and he represents something very special of his time. And he is a legend. And he raised the movie, and he is a movie star.
Sure.
I mean,
No.
it makes a big difference when you have John Wayne or Sylvester Stallone in a movie.
Yes.
You talked about depicting reality, and I'm wondering, as we move forward in time with a historical event to a time when first-hand witnesses are no longer with us, do future generations of storytellers and filmmakers, should they cease to try to depict these events, or else how can they strive to authentically depict them?
You're talking in general about any historical occasion, right? That's what you mean.
So you're saying because there's less access? Are you saying
The problem is you have to make
stories?
a movie, you know? You have to make a movie, unless you want to do a documentary, and that's what a lot of these things are. And, you know, there are a lot of people who like a different style. They like minimalization, and they don't want any enhancement. Now, that can be very dull, and it's a choice. I was raised in the commercial filmmaking sense. Marty Scorsese was a teacher, you know, and that was a kind of, certainly a kind of example. You dramatize, you exteriorize your interiors, but you keep it as personal as you can, as personal as you can. And I'd say the same thing is true about history in these events. You do as much research as you can, but understand that sometimes 5 characters have to be 1 character, just because of time and economy and all the reasons of film. As you know, real life doesn't happen that same way. It doesn't happen in climactic sequences. And some filmmakers do it that style, but it's another style, and I don't think it's never shown itself to be successful on a wide level commercially.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes. Back here. Sir, yes.
As accurate as possible. Now, there is a lot of history out there, and I'm certainly a contentious figure, but I will defend the histories I've done to as much as I can with some footnotes and everything I can.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've seen movies that really piss me off because they really distort you at least stick to the spirit of the time. If you're going to do a movie about, for example, the FBI in Mississippi, you know, and you start to give credit to J. Edgar Hoover, well, you shouldn't be doing that because he didn't do shit. And it was solved in a different way. So these kind of things really are, in other words, when the FBI was doing those kind of movies, as they did, many of them, that angers me because they're taking credit for what they don't deserve. Same thing is true about many military movies, many military movies, especially since 2001. It's just gotten worse and more. The 60 Days at Benghazi, whatever, I mean, you saw Black Hawk Down, I mean, one American has to go down, but 60 Somalis die for that one American. And that's part of the mentality that's screwing us up.
Triumphalism around war films. Did you ever see King and Country, Joseph Losey's film?
Yeah, years ago, what?
It's a great film. It's a nice
Well, that
film.
was more about
World War I.
War Marshall.
Yeah, it was cool.
Thank you
Anyway.
for being in Middlebury, Vermont, Middlebury New Film Makers Festival. It's exciting to have you here. Appreciate you showing up. My question is, have you been to Vietnam recently?
Have you been to Vietnam recently? Oliver. Have you been to Vietnam recently?
Not so recently. I went back 4 or 5 times. I think about 2013, maybe the last time. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Why?
Um,
You've been there.
yeah, I've been
It's
to Vietnam.
beautiful. It's an amazing country. Amazing. Beautiful country.
Mhm. Other questions? Yes, over here.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm curious if you've seen the film Come and See.
The film Come and See?
Yeah. Similar in the depictions of war,
Russian
horror. Yeah, I'm just curious because your film sort of takes like an innocent into war and watches this change, whereas obviously Come and See is from the point of view of a child. And I'm curious why you picked like Charlie Sheen's POV character, why you chose to structure it that way, in comparison to say like something like Apocalypse Now, Come and See, where you're like a true innocent come in, because he's not completely there.
So why it is that Oliver chose the Charlie Sheen character as the point of view character? Is that what's the question? Yes? Okay. Why the Charlie Sheen character why was he the point of view character?
Well, that's where it started. It was about me. And it was about my experience. And it was intended to be that kind of story about an infantry point of view, which was I thought, pretty original and unique because they never do that. Often you get the officer point of view of the sergeants and this and that, but I've never seen war movies that really are done from the worm's eye view up, and that was my experience.
Yeah. Yes, right here next to you.
Thank you for being here. You were talking about trying to influence the national psyche at the time making this film. When it came out, movies were the medium where we got our stories. I mean, I'm just curious, generally now, do you feel like film still has the power to shape narratives that help change, the way the U.S. is going? I mean, your filmography is about making America look at itself. I'm just curious how you feel.
Yeah, your filmography is aimed at making America look at itself, reflect on its own situation. Do you think film can be effective that way? Did you feel that Platoon was effective that way?
Well, did I stop any wars? No. We kept going back to wars with Iraq and twice, and so many wars since then, and now, don't get me going on the current situation because it seems very dark. It seems we're addicted to war. I think the money's gotten only bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know. It seems we can't kick it. There's nobody's going to stop the military-industrial machine. It's a very, very that and pharmaceuticals, right? We're kind of assaulted.
So yeah, where the nation did not really itself stop and reflect on the war. You can look at, the French in Indochina, being in Indochina, did reflect on it a bit more. They elected a prime minister, Pierre Mendès France, who came in with the sole objective of ending the French involvement in Indochina. So the country had a referendum really on the war. America never really went through that. And so the films really became the way that the question of reflection on the Vietnam War was able to enter the culture. And in the way that Rambo was a kind of denialism and triumphalism, and we don't have to feel so bad, guys, because look at this.
And those of you who are young, that was really a big movement back then, the POW movement. That was a disguise, kind of like, we got to go look for our missing men. That's what the Chuck Norris and Rambo things was about. And that, to me, was a distraction from the main event, which was why were we there in the first place, and what were we doing, and what about the Vietnamese, and
Right, and so this film, more than any of the others, because Deer Hunter actually created a kind of metaphor of the American soldier as the victim of those Russian roulette sessions that they had.
going back,
Yeah.
going back to get your partner.
Right. So in the case of this film, this was the one film that came through that really it's almost the equivalent of 10 years a slave, 12 years a slave treating slavery. This film is visceral, it's intense. You have to really stay with it and face this part of the reality, which was, if you really want to talk about the war, this is what it was. And to then put that, absorb that and move on, but not without facing that.
Well, we did move on. United States of amnesia, what are we going to say?
Yeah, right. Other questions, comments? Over here, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Have there been films made from the Vietnamese perspective, or would you ever participate or collaborate with someone if they were trying to make a film from the Vietnamese perspective of the war and the war experience?
Yeah, Oliver made a film. This is part of a trilogy that Oliver made about Vietnam. Born on the 4th of July was the second installment, and then a film called Heaven and Earth, which was from more of a Vietnamese perspective. But he's asking, are there any films made from the Vietnamese perspective about the war?
Oh, there were very good ones, yeah, but you have to go to the Vietnam. They don't really distribute them very much in the U.S., but there are some very good ones. And now there's getting a whole second generation, the younger generations, the sympathizer, books like that. But that's
The sympathizer.
Heaven and Earth for me is very important because that is the story of a Vietnamese peasant non-city dweller, a non-intellectual. She was a peasant. She wrote this story. It's vulgar and blunt, and it's 2 books, Heaven and Earth. And it's a condensation of many of her experience, because she experienced both sides. The village was trapped by the French, the Viet Cong, the Americans. She was betrayed from both sides, and she ended up marrying an American, and we thought that was a happy ending, but it wasn't. It turns into a longer story. She ends up, you gotta see the movie. It's a Heaven and Earth. It's one of my favorite movies, but it's one of my less seen, because when it came out in 1989, the Vietnamese girl who was the star there was not an interest in seeing the Vietnamese story. Tommy Lee Jones played the husband, and he did a great job, but it was essentially a Vietnamese story from their point of view.
The Sympathizer has been a recent series. Has anybody seen that? Interesting. So many years later, by a guy who came here really as a child as part of the airlift out of Vietnam at the end of the war. And what's interesting is the ambiguity, the political ambiguities that he explores. It's not a one-sided perspective on the war, which is interesting. Yeah. Anybody else? Right here? Yes, down front.
A comment and a question. When my husband died, my son was 10 years old, and he had a strong interest in history, especially the Vietnam War. And I had come of age during the war and made a study of it. So we watched your movie dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And it became a tremendous catharsis for us, because I think you really captured the ethos of that war, that generation. So many of the political things come up in comments during the movie. Years later, it became such a part of our lives, we quote the lines to each other. Years later, when I had to tell him I had cancer, he started to cry, and I said, "Everybody's got to die sometime, Red." And we both laughed, and your movie has been a tremendous force in our lives. Thank you. And my question is, would you mind, I have the copy of the movie that's the director's commentary, and my son and I would be thrilled if you would just sign it for us.
Yeah, okay, well, you have it with you?
I do.
I'm sure afterwards. Wondering if you would sign the director's cut DVD of the film that they've watched so many times, wondering if you would sign it afterwards for their son. Yeah.
That was all.
Well, she was talking about her watching the film Platoon dozens and dozens of times, that her 10-year-old son found a way to really, absorb it and grow from it, and as a result, she wants to know if you would sign the DVD.
With pleasure, with pleasure. Because of that war, I don't hear that well. I don't understand. Yeah.
Now, did you have an Elias character and a Barnes character that you experienced?
They both were, I knew them independently, that's why I wrote about them. Although I never saw Barnes killed, but Elias, they never met each other. But Elias was killed in a very strange way, and I wrote about it in my first memoir, Chasing the Light, which goes to Platoon and Salvador, but because they were so turbulent films. Elias was killed in a weird, you see, I gotta say this is very to the point. This American government and the Pentagon lie. They open their mouth, they lie. I'm sorry. It's very tough for me to believe anything they say. When it comes to military matters, there are so many people killed in Vietnam by their own troops, by accident, by artillery, by bombs, by things that were. There was a scene here in the movie when he hits the guy in the head. The lieutenant's called in the wrong airstrike. That was common. You get rattled. You can't see well. The watch is blurry. All that shit happens. So people got killed for the stupidest reasons. And I would estimate, I think my first wound came about because the idiot sergeant behind me threw the grenade too short. That's what I feel. And it happens all the time. And they don't and not acknowledge it because they don't want the parents to know that their kid died for that reason. That's a common, I've had a scene in Born on the 4th of July where the Marine, and that's the crux of the story, is that Ron Kobe shoots his own man, and he knows he did, but they deny it. So he has to go anyway. That's a whole other, this is a big thing about Vietnam, and jungle in general. You can't see anything, and it's all asymmetrical flanking. And I imagine the same thing is true to a large degree in the desert. No matter what you do, where were we recently? In Ukraine, forget it. It's really hard too. Because, there it's more artillery and more artillery.
Looks like World War I trench warfare almost.
Yeah, it's as dangerous as dangerous.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that comes across very strongly in the film is the extraordinary violence of the bombs themselves, the impact of the bombs, and frankly of the automatic weapons as well. Just how intense.
Well, you have to realize those bombs are dropped very close for camera purposes, but even at a distance, the bomb you don't see it visually as much, but when you feel it, it's a detonation.
Right. Yeah. One more? Does anybody have something? Gentleman here in the first row.
So why have Charlie Sheen's character kill the sergeant at the end?
Why have Charlie Sheen's character kill Barnes at the end?
Because I felt like it. Because, part of that is because in the movies there's a code, right? The hero must never kill the other guy in cold blood. It seems to be a code on every Western and pretty much every. So I wanted to violate it because I'm not the man who breaks the rules.
Thank you so much, Oliver will also be here tomorrow night, not here, but it's Twilight Theater, showing one of the episodes of The Untold History of the United States, which really digs into what I call, the moments that really pivot towards different directions in American history. And this will focus on FDR, his vice president, Henry Wallace, and also Harry Truman. There are about 8 episodes, yes? 8 or 9 episodes? 12 episodes total. We'll also talk a little bit about the episode he did on Reagan and Gorbachev. So I think we'll have some interesting conversation there. And then on Saturday night, we'll have Wall Street, which will play, I believe, in Dana.
That was my follow-up.
This was the following film.
It's the war movie in Wall Street.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
I believe it's Wall Street Town Hall Theater.
Town Hall Theater, yes, Wall Street on Saturday night. Also 4 o'clock on Saturday in the patio at Millbury Inn. We'll just have a general conversation that you'll be able to, ask some questions with some things that I'll be exploring with Oliver as well. So, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.